Welcome to ServeSafe 2.3, ServeSafe Manager Guide 2.3. So where we left off with the last episode was Fat Tom. If you're watching this on the playlist, then we didn't really leave off. You're just kind of here, you know. We covered Fat Tom. We covered controlling Fat Tom conditions. The reason why I left off at that particular spot is because we're going to be getting into bacteria and viruses. And the sad part about this is you simultaneously need to learn this, and it's super boring. We have major bacteria that causes foodborne illness. Now, a lot of the bacteria, viruses, and stuff that I talk about will be on the test and individual ways that you could prevent it. All of the bacteria and viruses, the thing that you will see on the test the most will be the following. Exclude from the operation food handlers who have diarrhea or have been diagnosed with an illness caused by blank. Whatever specific bacteria, whatever virus, or whatever, just assume that that is going to be one of the prevention measures that's always around. I don't know how many times it's going to show up on the test. Like I said, it's randomized. There's other YouTube resources that have practice tests and stuff like that. I'm just letting you know about that right now. The four main bacteria that causes the illness is Salmonella typhi, non-typhoidal salmonella, or NTS, Shigella SPB, and Shiga toxin-producing E. coli. So what are the sources for these four bacteria? Well, Salmonella specifically resides in humans. That's why it's so important to make sure that we're washing our hands and all that. You only need a tiny little itty bitty bit, like one little bite, and that's it. You're done. Non-typhoidal, for some reason, I have a lot of trouble with this word. Non-typhoidal salmonella. Now, Shigella can be found in humans, but it can also be transferred from feces onto food. Now, most of you are thinking like, well, when the fuck am I going to be having poop all over? I'm not going to like wipe my ass and then get poop all over everything. Yeah, but flies like poop also. So if you don't have a wind curtain, for example, say you get a delivery and you don't have a wind curtain on the back door, and flies were rolling around in poop because they love poop, and they get inside and they land on something and it's not cooked properly, someone could get sick. So that's something to remember too. Now, Shiga toxin, E. coli, specifically is found in cows in their intestines. Obviously, if you're infected, it's going to show up with you too. But that's also why ground beef is so gross to cook under 155, why people that like mid-rare are just disgusting human beings. Not really. I mean, just whatever. You eat it how you like it. All of that beef, if you don't know where it's coming from, it gets ground up and mixed together. So with a steak, it's on the outside, easy to kill. With burgers, the outsides can be mixed in with the insides of the inside surface. The outside surface of the steak is mixed around with everything else, so you don't know where it was actually, like where the E. coli was actually coming into contact with the beef.
People infected with the E. coli bacteria may be unknowingly infecting others. More than 150 people have become ill after eating tainted hamburger meat at Jack in the Box restaurants in Idaho and Washington State.
The health department says all the news about Jack in the Box has caused us to lose sight of how easy the disease is transmitted from person to person.
That was like 9 or something like that. But that was an E. coli outbreak, and it came from stuff like this. So you got to just be super careful. Now, salmonella can be in ready-to-eat food if you don't wash your hands and you're touching, like, you know, somebody's cooked chicken tenders. NTS, I'm just going to call it NTS. NTS, as I stated before, comes from poultry eggs, but it also comes from other meat, milk, and dairy products, and it can come from produce because of, you know, water that has it in it and stuff like that. There was an incident a while back where a bunch of, I think it was spinach, and it was because humans were actually pooping in the field because of the really crappy working conditions. But they had like certain quotas they had to meet, so they were just down there doing their thing. And if somebody had to shit, they would just drop trow and fucking poop right in the field. It got all over whatever, their hands. I don't know. Maybe I don't want to talk about it, it's gross. But anyways, they were pooping in the field, and the water, it either leached into the water or something happened, and it transferred that bacteria from their poop onto the plants. That's how people got sick. That's why it's really important to wash produce as well. The produce itself doesn't just have it by nature. It's usually us infecting it with either cow manure or human manure or whatever. Some beverages can have Salmonella typhi as well. Shigella, the foods linked with that are anything that can easily be contaminated by your hands, right? You eat food, salads, stuff like that. Also, this is another thing that contaminated water, if it comes into contact with produce, it can get on that and make people sick as well. Like all these recalls is from this kind of stuff. E. coli, ground beef, and contaminated produce. Now, some of this should be pretty self-explanatory. Anything I mentioned that has to do with things getting contaminated through touching them, obviously hand washing is the prevention measure for that. Cross-contamination is another big one, so don't go touching raw chicken and then touch somebody's chicken tenders that are cooked. That's pretty common sense as well. When it comes to Shigella, controlling flies is a major way to prevent it. But with E. coli, the reason why we cook ground beef to at least 155 is because of E. coli. So if that comes up on the test, cooking ground beef to specific temperatures is a good way to control the bacteria there. Also, make sure that you are getting all of your products, whether you are in control of ordering or whatever, make sure you're getting your products from reputable vendors. I covered this in the last video. If you are getting crap from crap vendors, so a lot of restaurants want to purchase local, which is amazing, and I love that this is like a trend that is catching on. The problem with that is you got to vet your sources, because just because somebody has a greenhouse doesn't mean that they're doing everything right. Just because somebody owns a butcher shop or somebody slaughters meat, it doesn't mean that they are taking all of the necessary precautions that you would need to take to get that meat. If somebody gets sick in your restaurant, the customer is not going to care that you got contaminated meat from somebody else. The restaurant's going to be held liable. So make sure you're purchasing from reputable vendors. The two viruses that do the most damage are hepatitis A and norovirus. So between the 4 bacteria and the 2 viruses, we have
the big 6.
So they have 2 things in common, which is location and sources, and they all have the same destruction methods available. So viruses have to be carried by a living organism. They require a living host to survive, and they can still spread in the body. So you can still get hepatitis A from hamburger, for example. All the same sources for contaminated bacteria, same thing with viruses. It can contaminate food. It can contaminate water. Actually, a while back, I got E. coli from improperly treated water that was in the state or in the city, and they didn't tell anybody about it, and our whole family got like extremely ill. Like I lost like 25 pounds. It was awful. Oh my God, it was bad. Toxins can't be cooked out of food, but bacteria and viruses can all be killed with the normal cooking processes that you learn. Hepatitis A and norovirus both have something in common. Now, obviously, any ready-to-eat food can be contaminated with anything, with cross-contamination or whatever. So all the hand-washing stuff is still going to apply. But hepatitis A and norovirus specifically can contaminate shellfish, and shellfish is where a lot of this stuff comes from. That's why your employer or you are required to save the numbers from the specific box, because if somebody gets sick, then when they do an investigation, they have to know where that specific case came from. So that's why you have to have that information. You'll actually get in a lot of trouble for not having that information if they bust you and you're selling mussels and whatever. And that's from contaminated water. Now, the prevention measures, as with the other 4, exclude from work. Anybody that's sick, wash your hands. Reputable vendors, and, wear gloves and have common sense. So that's the big 6. Now, there's also several other types of contaminants. We have parasites, fungi, and biological toxins. Toxins can't be cooked out of food. So if something is contaminated, if you think about it, if you contaminate something with bleach and you cook burgers, you now have hot bleach in your burger. I'm sure a chemist or somebody that is smarter than me will tell me that there is eventually a temperature that will destroy it, but my point is, don't expect toxins, generally speaking, to be cooked out of food. Bacteria and viruses cook out, toxins don't. Fungi includes yeast, molds, and mushrooms. Parasites themselves are mostly associated with seafood. Now, this is even more important to get your stuff from reputable vendors, because they will be diligent about getting parasites, but always examine, especially if you're getting a half a thing of salmon, just make sure that you are examining it carefully, because if you get something that has a parasite in it and somebody else gets that parasite, your restaurant will forever be known as the restaurant that somebody got worms at, right? So be really careful. Also, make sure your food is cooked properly, of course, just like with everything else. One thing that a lot of people don't know is that fish is actually required to be frozen in order to help kill the parasites, because even though bacteria doesn't get killed through being frozen, parasites will die in the freezing process. So it's extremely important that if you get fish that was not properly frozen, just send it back. You're better off being out of fish for a few days while your new stuff comes in than getting somebody killed or getting somebody extremely sick because you really just needed to get that salmon. And fun fact, that's actually why places in the Midwest or Nebraska or whatever, why they can have sushi places, because all the fish has to be frozen anyway. So whether you're in New York or Seattle or Nebraska, it all has to be frozen the same way. So yeah, just reputable vendors. Now, with bacterial infections, if a bunch of people get sick at your restaurant, which hopefully they don't, the difference between bacteria and viruses getting people sick and toxins is that with bacteria and viruses, it usually takes people longer because the bacteria has to grow inside the body. The viruses has to spread just like anything else. With toxins, however, it pretty quick after. If somebody dumps a bunch of bleach in a bunch of hamburger and somebody eats that hamburger, or somebody decides to contaminate food intentionally with some hand soap, which actually happened to a friend of mine because the person working didn't like the guy, you get sick immediately. You're probably going to be in the bathroom throwing up. It's that fast. You can get neurological symptoms from toxins as well. It just depends. So toxins can be produced by bacteria, okay? Shiga toxin producing. That's what that is. It's a lot easier for chemical contaminants to happen than people think. Something as simple as spraying a wall and the spray hitting the wall and that mist drifts onto a food contact surface and then the fish or whatever hits that food contact surface. That's why it's really important to, if you have a Sani bucket, make sure that you're not splashing sanitizer onto food and giving people diarrhea. Making sure that when you have spray, like stainless steel polish, for example, is something we use a lot. Spray it onto a towel away from food and then wipe down a non-food contact surface with it. Never use stainless steel polish on any food contact surface. That means no prep tables or anything like that. Always use chemicals for their intended use, and also make sure that you are always storing chemicals away from food. Do not ever store chemicals above food, next to food, around food. They're in their own separate cupboard away from the food. The last type of contamination is physical contaminant. In one of my other videos, I showed you this picture of somebody finding a screw in their salad, and it still makes my teeth hurt thinking about it. But this is also why it really bugs me when people shove their hand through a 6-pan that's wrapped instead of taking the wrap off. Pieces of plastic can get in it. Pieces of, bread ties can get caught in things. Pieces of plastic, aluminum foil can get blown around by a convection oven and end up in food. There is a lot of ways physical contamination can happen. It's more than just like somebody threw a bunch of crap inside of a thing on purpose and put a bunch of tacks in there, razor blades or whatever. There's true, authentic ways. Another really easy way, you missed a piece of paper on one of the cheese, because sometimes cheese comes with paper, so that's why it's important to take it off before it goes onto the line. Not one at a time for each burger. It should be removed and put in a pan, and then that pan should be inspected before use, etc. So paper can end up in a burger, harmless enough, just tastes kind of gross and kind of ruins the experience. Not really going to do a whole lot, but it just sucks. Now, a screw in the salad, you can break your teeth on it. We got to be really careful with wire brushes, because a kid, I actually saw this on TikTok.
He had about a 2-centimeter metal wire that was lodged in the peritonsillar tissues on the right, and he'd started to develop an abscess around it. And he had been eating a hamburger when this had happened, so the grill brush, the metal wires on the grill brush had become lodged in the hamburger, and when he ate the hamburger, it got lodged in the soft tissues.
They couldn't catch it because it was such a small, little, tiny wire. I mean, this kid could have died from this, just for the way that his body was reacting and creating an abscess and all of that. All it takes is something simple like that just to totally fuck someone's day up or life, Also, that's why a lot of restaurants will use plastic scrubbies, because if a piece of plastic breaks off, it's not nearly as bad as if a piece of a Brillo pad breaks off, or steel wool, for example. As ServeSafe manager, one of the other things that is covered is the deliberate contamination of food. As I said before, One example was this cook that didn't like this other guy and he put hand soap in the guy's food. It can also happen through terrorists and activists. Now these are directly from the book, okay? Terrorists and activists, disgruntled staff, either current or former, vendors, and competitors. Those are the 4. So typically, deliberate contamination happens with a specific type of food. And it really sucks that we have people out there that are willing to hurt other people. Yeah, these people are fucking disgusting, but there are actual examples of this, enough so that it needs to be covered in a book, and you need to know what those 4 are. In the next video, we're going to be talking about something called the alert system. So you can Google that if you want to know about it ahead of time. Preventing deliberate contamination of food and how to respond from a foodborne illness outbreak. Then after that, we're going to get into food allergen. I want you to think really hard and study these because individual things will come up on the test. Like they may want you to, for example, which type of bacteria is found in the intestines of cattle. That's something that will show up on the test, and it'll be like a, multiple choice or whatever. So that'll be important. Make sure that you get your practice tests, okay? Those are awesome. I would say that if you can pass about 3 of your practice tests back to back with a really good score, odds are you're probably going to pass your exam. All right. So I hope you guys are doing awesome on your journey to getting ServeSafe Manager certified. Talking about the alert system and responding to a foodborne illness outbreak are definitely something that separates the standard ServeSafe test for line cooks and the ServeSafe Manager. Knowing how to prevent deliberate contamination of food is something that is important for managers because you never know who's going to try fucking with shit. If this is the first video that you stumbled across, I have a ServeSafe Manager playlist. We're currently in chapter 2.3. I'm going to have all of them coming out until I cover all 10 chapters. So that playlist should be popping up right about now. If you're generally just interested in cooking information about how to become a line cook, anything from the terminology to what exactly it is we do in the kitchen, a restaurant basics playlist that you can click into. But otherwise, you guys have an awesome day, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.